venit la o nouă ediție a emisiunii Ziua se apropie. În minutele care urmează vă prezentăm raportul european de la Bruxelles din septembrie 2024 din seria de rapoarte lunare de acest fel. Moderatorul Yossi Lempkowicz discută cu Tomas Sandell, fondatorul Coaliției Europene pentru Israel, și cu europarlamentarul Bert-Jan Ruissen despre noul Parlament European și despre situația actuală a Israelului. Vizionare plăcută!
After a pause of a few months, we are happy to be back in the studio of the European Parliament in Brussels to launch a new season of the European Report, the monthly talk show produced by the European Coalition for Israel. In this talk show, we discussed EU-Israel relations, the developments in Israel, as well as the ongoing fight against anti-Semitism. In this program today, we are going, of course, to discuss the ramification of the new European Parliament, which was elected in June, and which will now begin its 5-year electoral term. But of course, before we discuss this issue, let's talk about what happened during the weekend, this horrific news about the murder of 6 Israeli hostages in Gaza by Hamas. We are also going to discuss how this new parliament is different from previous ones and what, if any, changes in EU-Israel we can expect in the coming years. With us to discuss these topics and more in the studio, we have the new re-elected MEP Bert-Jan Ruissen from the Netherlands and a member of the European Conservatives and Reformers Group, and Tomas Sandell, founding director of European Coalition for Israel. Thank you for being with me today. My name is Yossi Lempkowicz from European Jewish Press and Europe-Israel Press Association. This is the European Report. First, let me ask you, Tomas Sandell, as I mentioned in my introduction to this program, 6 hostages were brutally murdered, young people, by Hamas in Gaza, apparently in the last few hours before they were killed, so in the last 48 hours. I will tell their names because it's important also for this program. It's Hersh Goldberg Polin, 23 years old, Eden Yerushalmi, 24, Almog Saroussi, 25, Alexander Laubanov, 32, Carmel Gat, 40, and Ori Danino, 25. Since we started this program, the war in Gaza has been going on for about 1 year, and we are going to commemorate the first year of the 7th of October attacks, and many hostages remain in captivity. The death of the 6 hostages reduced the number of remaining hostages to a number of 101 in total, but many are believed also to be no longer alive. We have ourselves received families of hostages in this program. And my question, Tomas Sandell, how do you think this terrible event will play out in the end? And how should the European Union act in this delicate situation? I have an additional question. How do you assess the EU's repeated call for a ceasefire? Do you think this would eventually lead to the release of the remaining hostages?
Thank you, Yossi, and thank you for reading out the names. I think it's so important when we speak about the 102 and whereas 50 are expected to be alive, that we remember that behind each number there is a name and there is a tragedy. It goes well beyond them, reaching their families and a whole nation and all of us who identify with the suffering of the Jewish people. And as you rightly said, when we met with family members of hostages here in December, I expected, foolishly perhaps, that this would be a matter of weeks, months before this would be settled. But here we are 11 months later and the situation is even worse than ever. To answer your question, I am very concerned that what we tend to hear from the international community after the brutal murder of these 6 innocent young Israelis is not a condemnation of Hamas to say enough is enough, this will have to come to an end. We actually see concessions. Concessions in the form of, and I'm quoting what is happening in London currently, to say, well, we will limit our export of arms to Israel. Concessions in terms of people asking for recognition of Palestinian state. I have recalled before, and I do it again, just days after this brutal terrorist attack, French President Macron said something very interesting. He said, let's build a global coalition to fight Hamas in the same way as we fought ISIS. I would renew this call today here in this program to the leaders of the European Union and beyond. It's time to renew our efforts to fight this evil in our time and be just as determined as we were with ISIS, as we were with the Nazi regime. We need to be in seeing the dismantling of the military capacity of Hamas once and for all. We cannot speak of ceasefire. There was no calls for ceasefire when we were fighting ISIS. There were no calls of ceasefires, of course, after D-Day and when the West was determined to put an end to the Nazi regime. Why should we call for ceasefires today? Yes, we can have discussions about the day after. What should the future look like in the region? But ceasefire should not be on the top of that agenda.
MEP Ruissen, first of all, we would like to congratulate you for your re-election and we welcome you back to Brussels. The same question for you regarding this murder of Israeli hostages in Gaza. What is your feeling?
Let me say, first of all, our thoughts are with the families of the hostages which are brutally killed, but also with the families of the hostages which are still kept in Gaza. The situation is so hard, so difficult. I fully agree with what Tomas just said. What you see is that the international community is criticizing Israel. And what we need indeed is a broad international coalition who is willing to say we have to stop Hamas. It's clear that Hamas is not, let's say, a normal army. Hamas is a terror organization. And I fully understand that Israel said, well, we have to control Gaza. We have to control the border with Egypt. And I think the international community has to understand that as well and to accept that as well. And the international community has to press Hamas and to say, well, Hamas, your time is over. We have to stop Hamas.
Mm-hmm. Let me go back now to the European Parliament. Perhaps you can share with our viewers what were some of the concerns that you met during the campaign as you ran for re-election. What did the voters tell you?
Yeah, a period of campaigning is always a really interesting time to speak with people. And we are not only speaking with people during the campaign, we are speaking and listening to the people during our whole mandate. But coming back to your questions, what kind of concerns do you hear? Well, indeed, it is clear people are concerned. People have concerns. I think more than, let's say, 30 years ago. I heard concerns about the geopolitical instability, concerns about the war in Ukraine, what consequences that war can have on Europe. But also concerns about the direction the EU is moving in the direction of more and more power for the EU, more and more power for Brussels. And what I heard is people have concerns about it. But I heard also a lot of concerns about the rising anti-Semitism all over Europe. During the campaign, I spoke with students, Jewish students, and it was really shocking to hear what the situation is at our universities.
Yes.
Jewish students don't feel themselves, let's say, comfortable. They feel them, let's say, unsafe. And some students said to me, well, we even don't dare to go anymore to the university because it is not safe anymore for us. And because of the, let's say, the atmosphere in universities is so anti-Israel and is becoming more and more anti-Semitic. That's a really big point of concern. Just we really have to work, also in the European Parliament, that was one of the main messages to work on. How can we stop the anti-Semitism in Europe?
I would add that European Jewish leaders earlier this year, they have called on European political leaders to act and no more talk about this fighting anti-Semitism. They even spoke about a rise of Aliyah, the immigration to Israel, as a consequence of the rise of anti-Semitism.
Yes.
So you think that it's still time to be worried about this phenomenon for European Jews because they are worried.
For example, we see a lot of demonstrations at our stations and on our streets with a lot of, let's say, anti-Semitic content. So it's in my opinion, it's up to the government to make clear, well, it's not, yes, we have the right of demonstration, but it's not acceptable to cross red lines. And when you cross a red line, when you are talking about Jews as animals, for example, or when you are supporting Hamas and when you are supporting terrorist organizations, that is unacceptable. We have to forbid that in Europe.
Thank you. Tomas Sandell, you were campaigning in your own way before the EU elections. You provided the electorate with a unique and the first Israel vote ranking. Can you tell the viewers what were some of the results in this vote ranking and how this has been received by the general public?
Yes. Yes, it's true that this is the first time ahead of the European elections that we've actually, Friends of Israel, have had some hard facts, black and white, to say, well, how do the parties actually vote, or what do they think when it's not election time? And I can only congratulate Bert-Jan Ruissen that his party group came on top in this ranking. And this was, of course, something that was quite striking, that at the moment we have the most support for Israel among the, what is referred to as the far right, with a gradual scale going to the left, meaning that among the hard left there is a real problem with anti-Semitism today. And what I would like to say, because until now we have not tried to analyze, what does this mean, It doesn't mean as an organization, obviously we want to engage with everyone, and we are doing that. And there is anti-Semitism also on the far right. That's clear. But I think at the moment, and as Bert-Jan mentioned, there is this rise among college campuses, meaning that the elite of society suddenly is becoming more anti-Israel, anti-Semitic than the general person on the street. And I think here we need to call it out that what we see developing is like a grand theory where the Jews are becoming the problem. I would call it neo-Marxist grand theory of colonial settlement colonialism, where you basically make the case to say that the Jews have no business being in Israel. And in the same way as we from the West, we colonized the United States, Australia, and Canada, this happened in Israel, and it needs to stop. And because, according to this perception, nothing can be done to reverse the situation in the United States. There's no talk of saying that we need to decolonize the United States, but for Israel, this could still happen, they believe. And I think it's important to point out that it builds on a false narrative. The Jewish people did not colonize anything. The Jewish people came back to their land, a land that has a connection with the people spanning 3,000 years. They didn't come like the Belgians in Congo to take the raw material and bring all the riches back to Belgium. They came to rebuild the land, to the blessing, I should say, also of the Palestinian Arabs. And that's why we, as an organization, is speaking so much about San Remo, because in 1920 in San Remo, it was clearly defined under international law that the Jewish people are the indigenous people of Israel, and that there is this connection, and there is a legal case, or there is a legal justification under international law for the Jewish people to come back to the land, to rebuild it, and to live together in peace with their Arab neighbors.
MEP Ruissen, we are now only in the first weeks of this new parliament term, but I would like to know what is your impression of this new parliament, and do you think that this new parliament will be more friendly towards Israel than the previous one? And also, will we find more understanding for Israel? And do you believe that Israel has many supporters in Europe?
Yes, I expect indeed that the new European Parliament will be, let's say, more Israel-friendly than the previous Parliament. Because what we saw is that the political parties, with a very one-sided critical approach towards Israel, lost many seats. The left parties lost many seats. So in the new composition, the position of the EPP, it's the largest party in the European Parliament, the position of the EPP is crucial. And when the EPP is willing to build, let's say, coalitions with the ECR, with the right-wing parties, then I see a big opportunity to create a very positive pro-Israel coalition in the parliament. But when the EPP continues, well, let's say, to work with the left parties, and when the EPP is to try to find coalitions with the left, then it will be really hard to change as a policy. But when you see the composition of the European Parliament as a whole, you can indeed expect that the new Parliament as a whole will be more Israel-friendly compared to the previous one.
Thank you. Tomas Sandell, one of the big questions before the EU elections was who will get the top jobs in the European Union, the President of the Commission, President of Parliament, President of the Council, and High Representative for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy. Can you share with the viewers the results, what was finally decided, and what we can expect from them.
Yes, you mentioned the positions. Ursula von der Leyen reaffirmed as President of the European Commission, still on the condition of the European Parliament accepting this. The same for Roberta Metsola, both from the European People's Party. And then Antonio Costa, former Portuguese Prime Minister, becoming the President of the European Council. And most importantly in this discussion, perhaps, that Kaja Kallas from Estonia is not only nominated but confirmed as the new High Representative for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy.
She will be only in November.
In November, yes. And I think this is as good as a composition that we could expect. And this, clear gender balance, north-south, left and right. And I think we can be quite happy.
By the way, MEP Ruissen, your group, ECR, was not given any of these top jobs. What is your comment on this?
Well, very brief. In my opinion, that's not very fair. But that's how it works in politics quite often. When parties are in power, apparently it's very difficult for them to share the power with other parties or to listen to the outcome of the elections. It's clear that it is for some parties quite difficult, but that's the reality. It's also, in my opinion, a little bit undemocratic. You have to listen to the elections, and well, the reality is that the ECR is bigger than the Renew. Mm-hmm. And Renew got indeed the position as High Representative. Yes. I would like to add, in addition to what Thomas said, when you compare Mr. Borrell with Ms. Kallas, then I'm quite happy, because Mr. Borrell, to be honest, talking about the policy of the EU in relation to Israel, it was a disaster. So with Mrs. Kallas, maybe we will find a more, let's say, balanced policy and an approach. Yeah.
Could I comment on Kallas, just to say the obvious, being a Finn and she's Estonian.
Yes.
I think she has a good position living in the shadows of Russia, knowing the difference growing up between totalitarian societies and democracy. And my hope is, of course, that she will apply this same logic when it comes to looking at the whole situation in the Middle East, see the difference between totalitarian regime and open democracies.
MEP Ruissen, your home country has a new government with the leading party of Geert Wilders, the PVV, the Freedom Party. Mr. Wilders is known as a controversial personality in Europe, but also as very, very pro-Israel. So what is your impression on this, and what impact could this have in the European Union?
Well, I think our new government will have, let's say, a more self-confident attitude towards the EU. So that means that our government will not accept everything that is coming from Brussels. And they will, I think, pay more attention to the Dutch interests. Our new government is, let's say, quite Eurosceptical. Mm-hmm. But talking indeed about the relation with Israel, I expect indeed that our new government can play an important role in the EU, talking about, let's say, improving the relations with Israel. So I really hope that our new government will raise their voice actively in Europe. That can be, I think, helpful to find a more balanced approach in Brussels.
That was all for this edition of the European Report. Needless to say that we are excited to be back in this studio in Brussels and cover the developments for yet another electoral term in this European Parliament. I would like to say a big thank to to you, MEP Ruissen, and the founding director of European Coalition for Israel, Tomas Sandell, for joining this program. My name is Yossi Lempkowicz, and you have just watched the European report. See you again next month.
Emisiunea Ziua se apropie, se încheie aici. Vă mulțumim pentru atenție și vă dăm o nouă întâlnire săptămâna viitoare la aceeași oră. Sunt Codruța Burghelea, vă spun la revedere și Dumnezeu să vă binecuvânteze!